My dad was so worried about being the perfect father to my stepsisters that he left me at a mall in another state, but now he's going to reap what he sowed. I have a dilemma, and it's caused me some trauma, so I need advice, and would like everyone's opinion and perspective. I'm 15 years old, female, and have been living with my dad for the past 3 years. Unfortunately, my mom filed for divorce 3.5 years ago, and I never got an explanation as to why she decided to divorce my dad and break up our family. The only condition my dad had was that he get full custody of me, which my mom surprisingly agreed to. I don't hold any resentment towards my mom, even though I haven't seen her in, over 3 years? We talk occasionally, but it's not the typical mother-daughter relationship. However, my dad always has something negative to say about my mom, always. He's constantly criticizing her and loves comparing her to my stepmom, Jenna. It didn't take long for my dad to find someone else, as is often the case after ending a major relationship. He and Jenna dated for about 3 months and then got married the next month. No one understood why my dad was in such a hurry to get married, especially after coming out of such a long marriage. He said he fell in love with Jenna at first sight and admired the kind of mother she was to her daughters, Joanne and Jenny. I know I'm the last person to judge or comment since I'm not a mom and just a teenager, but honestly, Jenna wasn't exactly mother of the year. She barely spent time with my stepsisters and would spend weekends shopping and pampering herself. She made it very clear to me that I shouldn't expect her to be a mother figure in my life, and I was 100% okay with that. What I couldn't accept was how much my dad changed. We used to be very close and did everything together, but now he spent all his time and money on my stepsisters. He barely had time for me, always excusing it by saying Joanne and Jenny grew up without a father, and he was trying to fill that void. My dad has been neglecting me, and honestly, it's been heartbreaking because I don't have anyone to talk to or turn to. I used to have a close relationship with my grandmother, Alina, but after my dad married Jenna, everything changed. I haven't seen or heard from her since. We have each other on Facebook, but we barely talk. My 16th birthday was approaching, and I wasn't excited. I was busy with homework when my dad came to tell me dinner was ready. I told him I wasn't hungry because I knew Jenna probably cooked meat, even though she knew I'm vegetarian. She never tried to accommodate my needs, so I usually made my own meals, which I didn't mind. My dad then said Jenna had spent the entire afternoon cooking dinner, and that he'd appreciate it if I showed some gratitude. This led to an argument, as I had to remind my dad that I'm vegetarian. He said I was just being difficult, and that being vegetarian was just a phase. I mentioned how neglectful he'd been towards me. I've been vegetarian for the past 5 years, which he's well aware of. I asked my dad to leave, and he responded by saying I was difficult, just like my mom. Those words hurt, and my dad noticed how much it affected me once he said it. He tried to apologize, but I told him I didn't want his apology. Eventually, he left me alone, and I continued with my homework. In the following days, I noticed my dad was trying to apologize for what he said. He was more attentive and tried to spend more time with me, which I appreciated. I almost never get my dad's attention, so I took advantage of this new attention. The week of my birthday arrived, and I was surprised to find my dad waiting for me outside school. I asked him what he was doing there, and he said he was taking me out for ice cream. The little girl inside me screamed with joy because it used to be one of our old traditions. He took me to our favorite spot, and we ordered our favorite ice cream. As we ate, we reminisced about the good old days. Then my dad surprised me with a weekend trip. He said we were going to Seattle for my birthday. I was so excited because Seattle is one of my favorite cities. He assured me he had everything planned and that it would just be the two of us, which made me even happier. Honestly, I couldn't wait. I couldn't remember the last time I'd gone on a trip with just my dad. It felt unreal. The week flew by, and Friday finally came, the day before my birthday. My dad called my school to inform them I wouldn't be attending. As I was getting ready, I noticed my stepsisters were also packing. Once I finished, my dad came into my room to grab my suitcase, and that's when he dropped the sad news. My heart broke into 1,000 pieces. My dad had just told me that our bonding trip was now a family trip. He explained that my stepmom wanted everyone to celebrate my 16th birthday together since it was such a significant event. So I asked him if we could celebrate as a family after he and I had our trip. He said everyone was already packed and ready to go, and it wouldn't be fair to ask them to stay behind. So we all went to Seattle. I was upset the whole trip. My dad tried talking to me, casual chats, but I ignored him and pretended to listen to music with my AirPods. I couldn't help but overhear my stepsisters talking about how all their friends would be super jealous they were in Seattle for the weekend. When we arrived at our Airbnb and settled in, I was scrolling through my phone when my dad came into my room and said we were going to grab burgers for dinner. Immediately, I lost my appetite because my dad and I had previously discussed trying some popular restaurants with vegetarian options. I started to complain. Then he told me to stop acting like a spoiled, entitled child and added that he wasn't going to let my bad attitude ruin the trip. We exchanged a few heated words and he stormed out, yelling for me to order my dinner on Uber Eats with his credit card. So I did exactly that. Now, here I am, feeling really bad. That's why I've turned to the internet for opinions on this whole situation. Do I have the right to be upset with my dad? I mean, he never mentioned my stepmom and stepsisters were coming. I'm starting to wonder if my dad even wants me here. What do you all think? Update 1. It's me again with an update. My birthday finally came, but honestly, I wish this trip never happened. I've learned that you can't always trust the people you're supposed to trust. After that heated argument with my dad, the rest of the trip was just miserable. I just wanted it to end because this wasn't how I envisioned my birthday weekend. While making breakfast, I got a birthday message from my mom. She always sends one, but I never really know how to respond since that's pretty much all I hear from her. My dad wished me a happy birthday and asked what I wanted to do, so I told him I wanted to go to the aquarium. Jenny complained, saying aquariums were boring, but I ignored her and showed my dad the one I wanted to visit. I regret choosing the aquarium because I couldn't enjoy it. My stepsisters complained the entire time, asking when we'd go to the mall. It was so annoying that I eventually exploded. Their constant whining was ruining my day. My stepmom scolded me, saying I was acting like a spoiled brat. I could tell my dad was also annoyed with my stepsisters, but he put on his usual fake happy face, something I've gotten used to. He rarely disciplines them and usually takes their side. Finally, they went off to the gift shop while I continued exploring the aquarium. I couldn't do much of what I wanted because my stepsisters were always pushing ahead. Still, I took some pictures and got myself a cool bracelet. When I eventually found them in the gift shop, they had practically bought out the entire store. My stepmom asked why I took so long and ignored me when I didn't answer. She tried to get my dad to say something, but he just changed the subject by suggesting we head to the mall, which made my stepsisters very happy. When we got to the mall, they rushed into an expensive clothing store. I asked my dad if I could look around, but as usual, he wasn't paying attention to me, so I went off on my own. While browsing, I got a birthday message from my grandmother, Alina, which I appreciated, though it hurt because we're no longer close. As I walked around, I saw that my dad had been posting on Facebook about how proud he was of himself for raising me on his own these past 3 years. Parenting seems to be his entire identity, and he always wants endless praise for it. Eventually, I got tired of walking and went to find my dad and the others, but I couldn't find them. I started feeling anxious and called my dad, but he didn't answer. I tried calling my stepmom and stepsisters too, but they didn't pick up either. I called my dad again, but his phone went straight to voicemail. It's been an hour, and I'm still looking for them. I can't help but panic, and I feel tears welling up in my eyes. I've sat down in one spot and started writing all this, hoping my dad will call me to tell me where they are. Update 2. Here's another update. It's been a week, and what a week it has been. I never thought I'd experience something so traumatic in my life. After spending 2 hours looking for my dad at the mall, I finally saw on Joan's Snapchat story that they were already driving back home. My body froze, and I broke down crying right there in the middle of the mall. I couldn't believe my dad had left me. I was beyond confused. How can a father just abandon his daughter? Thankfully, a security guard helped me, and since my dad wasn't answering my calls, I had no choice but to reach out to my mom. I texted her first, asking if I could call her, and she called me immediately. When I explained everything, she was furious, started cursing out my dad, and told me she'd book a flight for me to stay with her. The next 24 hours were chaotic, as you can imagine. I had to spend the night alone at another Airbnb because my dad had left all my things at the place we were staying. My heart hurt so much, but I took the first flight available. When I landed, I was surprised to find myself back in my hometown. I thought I was going to my mom's new house, but everything became clear pretty quickly. It turns out my mom never actually left our city after the divorce. She explained that it was my dad who kept me away from her. She said she wanted a 50-50 custody arrangement, but my dad insisted on full custody, making her look like an irresponsible mother in court. All this time, I thought my mom simply didn't want me, but it turns out my dad was the reason I didn't have a relationship with her. Knowing my mom hadn't abandoned me like my dad said filled my heart. At first, she wanted to confront him, but I asked her not to. She agreed, but made it clear she wouldn't let this slide. Now, she's planning to fight for custody. She also told me I could stay with her for as long as I wanted, which I appreciated because I didn't want to go back to my dad. A few days later, I ran into my stepsisters at school. They were obviously shocked to see me, but I ignored them and went about my day. When I got home to my mom's house, I checked my phone and saw over 10 missed calls from my dad. I was tempted to call him back, but I resisted. I'm determined. I want him to face the consequences of his actions. Update 3. Here's the third update. A few weeks have passed, and honestly, my life has taken some major turns. My emotions are all over the place. Sometimes I feel great, and other times I feel low. I'm just trying to hold on to hope right now. Things with my mom have been going really well. We've been getting to know each other, and it's been amazing. Growing up, I was always a daddy's girl, so I didn't spend much time with her while she was around. Now I find myself wishing I had. I even met her boyfriend, Drake, who seems like a really nice guy. Recently, I visited my grandmother, Alina, and finally confronted her about everything. She asked to meet in person to explain her side of the story, so we met at a little cafe. She gave me the biggest hug, told me how much she missed me, and commented on how much I'd grown. The amount of love she showed me was overwhelming, especially after all the negative things my dad used to say about her. During that meeting, my grandmother revealed everything, making me realize just how much my dad had lied. She explained that she never wanted to cut ties with me, but couldn't stand my stepmother, Jenna, and her daughters. In her words, she felt they were leeches and opportunists, something my dad clearly couldn't see. She also mentioned something I had never been told before. Jenna had worked as my father's personal assistant before they started dating. Suddenly, everything made sense. When my grandmother and the rest of the family expressed their dislike for Jenna, my father cut ties with them but kept them on social media for appearances. Hearing this was such a relief because my father had always made it seem like it was my fault that his family didn't want to be around anymore. He blamed both my mom and me, constantly reminding me that my mom was the reason his family didn't want to see me. When I told my mom all of this, she revealed the reason she had filed for divorce. She explained that my father was obsessed with impressing his family and would put her in uncomfortable situations just to gain their approval. And the real reason he demanded full custody of me? He wanted to look like the perfect father to his family rather than build a healthy co-parenting relationship. Learning all this broke my heart. So many things could have been avoided, and suddenly everything made sense, especially his obsession with being the perfect dad to my stepsisters. He wanted to look like a hero who had taken in fatherless girls. I always knew my dad cared a lot about his reputation, but I didn't realize just how far he would go. So now, my mom, my grandmother, and I have come up with a little plan. We're going to expose my father for who he really is, and the way we're going to do it is by destroying what he values most, his reputation. I feel like he needs to get a taste of his own medicine, but I also think we should file charges against him for abandonment. Do you think a report like that would be valid? Update 4. It's been 2 long weeks since I met with my grandmother, and I'm finally starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. I've been living with my mom for over a month now, and since my dad has no idea where she lives, he hasn't been able to reach me. My mom, Drake, and I were on our way to my grandmother's house. She was hosting a barbecue, and the whole family would be there, including my dad and his in-laws. This was all part of the plan. My dad had no idea we were coming. When we arrived, we found everyone outside, and my grandmother waved us over. My dad's face turned as pale as a ghost. Apparently, he had been bragging about being an amazing father to some relatives, and I learned that he had told everyone I couldn't attend because I was sick with the flu. Then my grandmother asked my dad, "Well, why are you lying?" My dad couldn't get a word out, so I decided to speak for him. I exposed him. I told everyone that my dad was nothing but a liar who had abandoned me. My stepmother immediately jumped in, calling me a little liar and claiming the reason I was with my mom was that I had run away from home. My mom pulled out her phone and showed everyone the text messages from the day of the incident. One of my dad's cousins was shocked and asked, "How could you do this? Leave her in a completely different state?" My grandmother shook her head in disappointment and told my dad she was tired of this and disgusted by his actions. My dad tried to explain himself, but no one was listening. My great aunt looked at him and said, "You're a disgrace to this family." This made my stepmother snap. She grabbed my mom's phone out of her hands and smashed it to pieces on the ground. She started calling my mom and me every name in the book, but the insult that made my mom lose her composure was when she called me a fatherless girl. My mom immediately slapped her and then turned to my dad, asking him why he wasn't defending me. Instead of taking my side, my dad decided to confess one of his wrongdoings. He admitted that the reason he left me at the mall was because my stepmother had started a fight with him about me and had forced him to take them home. He confessed that my stepmother had threatened to leave him and that he couldn't afford another divorce because he already felt ashamed and humiliated by his divorce from my mom. However, my grandmother didn't buy his excuse. She reminded him that she had warned him about my stepmother, but he didn't listen. Everyone looked at my dad with disappointment on their faces, and I could tell he couldn't take it. He started blaming me for everything, falsely accusing me of being nothing but a rebellious teenager. My mom couldn't take another lie from my dad, so she decided to drop the biggest revelation. She told my dad she had filed for full custody of me. My stepmother immediately rejoiced at the news, But my dad began begging my mom not to take me away from him. He knew that if she did, his perfect dad reputation would be completely ruined. Then he stood up and started yelling at my stepmother, blaming her outright for ruining his relationship with his family and saying that if it weren't for her, he would still be close to them. When my stepmother was about to defend herself, my dad simply stormed off in anger. She froze for a moment, then tried to run after him, but when she got to the driveway, he was already gone. It seems my dad has a particular habit of abandoning people. As for the report, we also filed it right after this confrontation. The charges we filed are for abandonment, neglect, abuse, and alienation, a pretty hefty cocktail of accusations, for which we have some evidence that will deliver another blow to my dad. It's not just his reputation with his family and others at stake. We're talking about serious legal trouble now. Plus, all of this will help with the custody case my mom is pursuing, not to mention my statement that I no longer want to live with my dad, of course. Update 5. It's been a couple of months since the family revenge barbecue, and so much has happened since then. It's taken me some time to adjust to everything, but I'm slowly starting to adapt and truly feel at peace with what has happened. I now live officially with my mom full-time. She decided to handle everything through the court, and it really worked in her favor. Once the judge heard that my dad had abandoned me at the mall, they sided with my mom and granted her primary custody. My mom and I are continuing to get to know each other, and it feels good to be in a home free from toxicity. Even Drake has been an amazing stepdad, and I'm grateful my mom has found someone who truly puts her first. In addition, I'm super excited because I'm going to be a big sister soon. My mom and Drake are expecting my baby sister. On the other hand, my father is going through a complicated divorce with Jenna. She's trying to claim half of his assets, and apparently, it's driving up his legal expenses. I must admit my father was smart enough to marry her under a prenuptial agreement, which means she doesn't have the right to half of his assets. However, since she left her job to become a stay-at-home wife, she is entitled to some form of alimony. But here's the interesting part. My father has been telling everyone that they're divorcing because she cheated on him, which is a lie. Jenna may be many things, but a cheater isn't one of them, at least not that I know of. I think he started this rumor just to save his reputation because he's embarrassed about going through another divorce in less than 5 years. Unfortunately for him, his family doesn't want anything to do with him after the way he treated me while married to Jenna. They've said they might forgive him eventually, but for now, he's not even invited to family events. But these are the least of my father's problems right now, considering the abandonment charges. He could face up to 5 years in prison and a fine of $15,000. Sometimes I wonder how all this will work if he loses the divorce and Jenna wins. If he's in prison, how will he pay her? Update 6. I wanted to give you one last update on everything that's happened recently. First, I want to tell you about the good parts of my new life because, after all the darkness, I want you to know that there's light at the end of the tunnel. My mom and I are rebuilding our relationship and trying to make up for all the lost time. I can't tell you how healing it has been to spend time with her without my father's lies or manipulations in the way. My mom has been a warm, steady presence, something I realize I never truly had from my father. Even when I make mistakes, or there's something we need to work through together, she always approaches it with empathy and respect. That helps me grow without carrying guilt. And now I have a baby sister. Her birth has been a moment of celebration and unity for all of us. My mom and Drake have fully dedicated themselves to giving her the love and stability that I now receive in this new chapter of my life. Drake has been an enormous support, not just for my mom but for me too. He treats me with respect and shows me every day what it means to be a real parent. Drake, my stepdad, treats me better than my stepmother ever did. The most ironic part is that Drake treats me better than my own father ever did. There's no comparison, favoritism, or ulterior motives. To him, I'm a daughter, not an accessory to help him maintain an image. I've also reconnected with my grandmother. Reconnecting with her is one of the greatest gifts of this new life. She and I had a very special relationship when I was younger. Seeing her and spending time with her now feels like reclaiming a part of myself. Sometimes we talk about all those years and how much she suffered from that distance too. What gives me strength is knowing that I can now count on her, and she's an important figure in my life and my sister's as well. But I know most of you are probably more interested in what's happened with my father and Jenna rather than the positive things in my life, so here it is. A few months ago, while talking to my mom, some details came to light about how my father gained custody of me. It turns out that when I was little and my parents were still married, one day I got really sick after eating a spoiled snack. I remember my father giving me the snack just before he left for work. After I got sick, I ended up in the hospital with a fever and discomfort. At the time, my mom took the blame because she thought I had eaten something bad while she was distracted. And so, my father used this incident to his advantage during the divorce. He made my mom believe he would use this episode to paint her as an irresponsible mother, and under that pressure and fear of losing me entirely, she gave in. I was very young, and while I remembered my father giving me the snack, he made me promise not to tell anyone. Of course, I didn't know about his threats to my mom, otherwise I would have spoken up much sooner. But talking to my mom about everything that's happened, she told me all this, and that's when I realized just how far my father's lies had gone. Finally, the legal situation has come to a conclusion. My father was found guilty of child abandonment, and considering it happened across state lines, he received a 3-year prison sentence. It may not seem like much compared to all the damage he caused, but honestly, after everything we went through, knowing he'll serve some time behind bars brings me a certain relief. To be honest, the fact that he's no longer in my life is a gift in itself. As for Jenna, she may still be entitled to alimony while my father is in prison, and if he can't pay because he doesn't have a job, Jenna might be able to claim some of his assets, like the car or the house we lived in, at least partially. However, Jenna doesn't need anything right now because she'll be joining my father in prison. Well, not literally since they're not in the same facility, but you get the idea. Initially, we only pressed charges against my father, as he was primarily responsible for my care. However, during the trial, Jenna's involvement in the abandonment became evident, especially since she agreed to leave me behind that day and, according to my father's confession, even pressured him to do so. In the end, Jenna received a 1-year prison sentence. While it's a lesser sentence, the fact that she's being held accountable for her actions feels like justice to me. Still, when Jenna is released, she might still have rights to alimony, I think. So she'll probably go after whatever assets my father has left, even while he's in prison. As for my stepsisters, honestly, I don't have much information. I imagine they must be in the care of a relative, but the truth is, I have no interest in contacting Jenna to find out more. It's not exactly how I'd want to spend my time, to visit someone in prison. And that's it. Now I can focus on having a normal life.